Let's begin in Ukraine, where the President Volodymyr Zelensky says annexed Crimea must be freed to end the war in Russia. Meanwhile, the Ukraine hit Russian targets in Henichesk in southern Kherson region, about 125 miles from the nearest Ukrainian front line. It appears to be Ukraine's deepest strike yet into Russian-occupied territory. The following report takes a look at the main development as the Russian-Ukraine war enters its 168th day.
One person was killed when a Russian airbase in the annexed Crimean Peninsula was rocked by blasts that Moscow said were detonations of stored ammunition and not the result of any attack. In the northern town of Bucha, 15 bodies were buried after they were found 4 months after the Russian forces withdrew from the area. The local mayor said all the people who were shot and exhumed from a mass grave had torture marks on them. The head of Ukraine's state nuclear power firm warned of the very high risk of shelling at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the Russian-occupied south, and said it was vital that Ukraine forces regain control over the facility in time for winter. Meanwhile, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Marino, has said shelling at Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has violated virtually all 7 nuclear safety and security pillars. He noted that the International Atomic Energy Agency experts believe that shelling hasn't caused any immediate nuclear safety threat, based on information provided by Ukraine. 2 more grain-carrying ships left Ukraine Konomosk port on Tuesday, Turkey Defense Ministry said, bringing the total of vessels to have left the country under a safe passage deal to 12. An European Union ban on the import of Russian coal, agreed by member states in April, began today. The coal ban was part of a 5th round of EU sanctions imposed on Russia following revelations of atrocities in Ukraine, including the killing of civilians in the town of Bucha.
KATCH ONONUJU is a global affairs analyst, and it joins me on the World Now to discuss the latest updates in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. Mr. Zelensky's latest remarks suggest he believes that Ukraine must retake the peninsula before the war can end. So with this insistence, do you see the war ending anytime soon?
I think that is that's just rhetorics. He knows historically Ukraine never owned Crimea. Crimea had been part of Russia since 1774, when the Russians took it from the Ataturks and held it until 1952, when the Ukrainian Russian-speaking leaders, Brezhnev, ordered that it should fall under the Ukrainian administrative control. It was administrative control. So it's been under Ukrainian administrative control. And because Ukraine didn't seem to understand Russia's part in regards to staying together after the end of Soviet Union, Russia did that in 2014, instructed captains at the Sevastopol to revert control to Russia. And that's how Russia took that. And it's been that way. So we're looking at Ukraine's mistakes. It could lead Russia to want to take over Odessa. And that will make Ukraine a totally landlocked country. I think that's more severe. And that's what Mr. Zelensky should be looking towards, not talking about Crimea that is gone and wouldn't seem to come back to Ukraine Oblast. I don't see that as being anything to be taken seriously by anybody. We should be begging and appealing to Russia to maybe allow Ukraine keep Odessa so that it should have proper access to the Black Sea. I think that is what should hold the mind of all negotiators right now.
Well, Russia sounded a warning last month when ex-President Dmitry Medvedev stated that, he threatened last month that any attack on Crimea by Ukraine would be considered deeply serious by Moscow. And he also added that Judgment Day will instantly await, such, attack. So how serious do you think this warning is, looking at the series of attacks, the series of explosions at the Russian airbase in Crimea, which was quickly denied by Ukraine as being responsible for the explosions?
Those things are inevitable. now that Russia has become entrenched in eastern Ukraine, they will expect more of such asymmetrical guerrilla incidences as they are seeing right now. We know the reasons why there had been attacked by Ukraine on the nuclear power plant was because Russia was going to connect the nuclear plant to its own national grid. And so when you see a lot of this administrative controls and maneuvers being placed by Russia on this institutional value to properties of Ukraine, Europeans will start getting very worried and very, very jittery. So I foresee this kind of crisis continuing now that Russia has outgunned and outmanned Ukraine and taking control of the Donbass, creating a direct corridor from Mariupol going down to Crimea. That's been achieved. What we are begging right now is if there could be a way of allowing Ukraine access to the sea through Odessa. I think that should be in the mind of everybody. If you block Ukraine totally out of Odessa and it does not have any access to the Black Sea front, that would be a very, very devastating blow to its economy. Now look at, we're having to have negotiations arranged by the United Nations before Russians will allow Ukrainian vessels to sail from its ports. This tells you how very dangerous it has become for Ukraine economically and also financially. We need to start looking beyond the rhetorics and start looking at how to start making people come back home to Ukraine. It's a long way from now, but I think possible that we begin to look at those things from such perspective currently.
Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense for us.
right. Really a long way. But in the past, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said different things on this issue. He previously indicated that Ukraine could accept peace if Russia returned to their positions before 24th February, talking about this year. So which means retaking Crimea could be a subject of further negotiations. Do you see these two countries coming to a roundtable to find a to agree on this issue?
It is not possible. Don't forget, historically, Ukraine itself is a boutique creation of modern Russia. And a lot has happened. Forget Crimea. Should never be discussed. Crimea has never been historically part of cultural Ukraine. No, it was administrative part of Ukraine, as was instructed by Brezhnev. That was at the death of Stalin, and then that transition. And it remained Russian then. At that time, it had up to 7% of Russian population, and that has not changed. So yeah. I think the administrative controls over Crimea should be abandoned and Crimea returned back to Russia. And then we'll start looking at the other ones that are visible. How can you take Crimea when the entire Black Sea fleet is dominated by Russian commanders, Russian vessels, and they have active nuclear capable stationing right there in the Crimea? So how are you going to take such vessels? That's something that is totally unimaginable. I think we should set our eyes on things that are achievable, not the ones that are gone. Crimea is gone and gone forever.
The entire world is trying to recover, struggling to recover from post-pandemic, and the fight between Russia and Ukraine has really dealt a serious blow on the world economy. So when should we look forward to seeing these two countries agreeing so that there will be peace at the end of the day? The prices of everything is going up, and the world is reeling, from this war. So when do you see? When would you? I won't say you want to be clairvoyant now, but when do you see that this will come to an end?
Well, I think that's a very good question. This is a very avoidable catastrophe forced by NATO that deceived Mr. Zelensky. I have maintained that, and I'm happy to be proven right. this was avoidable. There was no need to get Ukraine to abandon the 2010 law made by Ukrainian parliament restricting Ukraine from taking this kind of position, making Ukraine non-aligned and peaceful like Austria, like Switzerland. This is not impossible. Why abrogate it? Why reverse the peaceful trend? Why reverse that position? Why make this experiment that has now brought catastrophe upon Ukraine? I believe, as you can see, Russia has won financially. Russia has won economically. Its ruble has become the best. Everyone else is today crying from the Russian-induced inflation, which has driven a lot of economies like that of the UK into recession, cost Mr. Boris Johnson his job, and right now threatening the US market. I think it was avoidable. I believe we should go back to how we used to be, if it is possible, because the Russians and some people have now learned there's a lot of advantage to be gotten if you can control sales that emanate from your economy into your own currency. That could make the ruble as strong as it is right now. So I don't think anything is impossible for the world economy. This crisis was avoidable. Let's go back to how it was. And then withdraw from this inflation-induced recession that we seem to be inevitably dragging the world's markets through. I think this is avoidable.
Absolutely. Well, global affairs analyst KATCH ONONUJU, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.